Arcfieldweather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Thursday morning, August the 28th. The big story again across much of the nation, especially the eastern half of the nation, unusually cool weather for the latter part of August. It looks like this cool, dry weather pattern will continue for the next several days across the Mid-Atlantic region, the Great Lakes, Midwest, Northeast U.S. Yesterday morning, there were more than 100 weather stations that experienced record or near record low temperatures. And again, this morning, there is a wide area from New England all the way down to the Gulf region experiencing record or near record low temperatures. Here's a sampling from the website coolweather.com of all these stations here in the eastern U.S. this morning that are close to record or actual records are being broken for the day. For example, right here is Millville, New Jersey, down to the 48-degree mark here. That is a daily low temperature record. Lots of 40s showing up in suburban areas of Philadelphia, for example, and across the river in interior parts of New Jersey. And again, quite a chilly air mass for this time of the year, and there is another one on the way for the upcoming weekend. A cold front will push through to off the eastern seaboard by early tomorrow, paving the way for more very cool weather for this time of the year over the Labor Day weekend in the eastern part of the nation. And then later next week, yet another chilly air mass will drop from Canada into the central and eastern U.S. Now, this cool weather pattern that has developed over the past several days in the eastern half of the nation also has been very dry in places like the Mid-Atlantic region. There's been very little rain actually for the last few weeks. In places like D.C., the month of August has seen only 0.2 inches rainfall at officially recorded at Reagan's National Airport. That looks like that will hold for the month, which ends on Sunday, and that would make it the driest August on record. You may recall last fall we had lots of dry weather in the Mid-Atlantic region, similar to what we've been experiencing over the last several weeks here. Last October, for example, Philadelphia's official recording station, PHL, at the International Airport recorded virtually no rain for the entire month of October. So yes, it's been comfortably cool, but it's also been quite dry. Here's the forecast map from last night's run of the Zero-Z GFS. By the way, all these maps from tropicaltidbits.com, and it shows the total rainfall over the next 10 days between today and Sunday, September 7th. There is a decent amount of precipitation here showing up in the northeastern part of the nation here over the next 10 days, but this is mostly backloaded between, let's say, days 6 and 10. The next 5 days will be continuation of dry weather across Mid-Atlantic, for example, and the northeast U.S. But over the next 10 days, there is a frontal system later next week that could produce some decent rainfall, and we'll just have to monitor that possibility over the next several days. Monsoonal rains still showing up this time of the year across the southwestern states. This is a moist flow of air that rides up along the western part of Mexico into the Four Corner states. Decent amount of rainfall. Places like Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah continue to see these monsoonal rainfalls. Typically they come in afternoon and evening shower and thunderstorm activity. So again, good news really for the southwestern states with this monsoonal flow, which is not unusual for especially for the second half of the summer season. A lot of rainfall expected across the Gulf region over the next several days. Well, again, really the big story to me has been the unusual chill across much of the eastern half of the nation, maybe the eastern two-thirds of the nation. Many record or near record lows yesterday morning and again this morning across much of the eastern U.S. Again, all the way from New England down to the Gulf. This is the 850 millibar temperature anomaly pattern here as we begin the day on Thursday. And this unusual chill extends all the way from the Rocky Mountain states to the East Coast and all the way up to Hudson Bay region of Canada. Now, we'll take a look here over the next several days, and we'll get a reinforcing chilly air mass into the northeast, and then another widespread cooler than normal air mass later next week into the U.S. from Canada. Let's move forward here, and here's a reinforcing shot of well below normal air that reaches the Great Lakes region later on tonight into the early part of tomorrow. And then a cold front that paves the way for that reinforcing shot of cool air pushes off the eastern seaboard early tomorrow, and it paves the way for a cool weekend here coming up, the Labor Day weekend in the Mid-Atlantic region, in the Great Lakes, Midwest, Northeast U.S. Look for many, many suburban areas of the big cities to drop down into the upper 40s Friday night and again on Saturday night with this comfortably cool air mass. By the way, this kind of a weather pattern would probably produce brutally cold air in the eastern U.S. during the months of, let's say, December and January. This time of the year, refreshingly cool, but this kind of a pattern in the winter season would be very, very cold indeed. Now, let's move forward here. Still chilly right into Monday. This is the forecast map for Labor Day. Cooler than normal for the most part across the eastern two-thirds of the nation, going right into the early part of next week. Out west, warmer than normal conditions, and up across Canada, warmer than normal conditions. But then we go later next week, by the middle of next week, take a look at this, another very chilly air mass showing up here over the northern plains by the middle of next week, and that is driving to the south and east and just kind of explodes across the middle part of the nation by next Thursday. This is a week from today, next Thursday, September 4th. Another very, very impressive, cooler than normal air mass, very likely to come with more record or near record low temperatures across a big part of the eastern half of the nation. By the way, it's not just daily low temperature records that have been set. Yesterday morning, Atlanta, Georgia dropped to 55 degrees. That tied the all-time low temperature for the month of August, which had been set a couple times prior. But the August temperature record was set yesterday morning, was tied yesterday morning way down here in the deep south in Atlanta, Georgia, again at 55 degrees. Very impressive cool air. And here we go into the end of next week. Continues to slowly slide to the south and east, so expect another chilly weekend for this time of the year next weekend. And of course, September 1st begins on Monday, which happens to be Labor Day. Well, let's talk a little bit more about the upper level pattern here. Again, I mentioned a moment ago that this kind of a pattern would likely result in some brutally cold air for the eastern states in the months of December and January. This time of the year brings unusual chill, but it's kind of a refreshing chill when you're at the end of August or the beginning of September. It's also not too conducive for tropical activity to make its way to the eastern seaboard, at least not for the next 5 or 10 days or so. The pattern may change. Certainly the pattern will change, I think, later on in September. I'm looking at maybe around September 9th or 10th or so. We'll show that in a moment here, where the pattern becomes a little bit more favorable for tropical activity to become a player again here. It's relatively quiet right now here. But we have a deep upper level trough situated across eastern Canada, the eastern U.S., associated with that cooler than normal air mass here, a lot of ridging out across northwestern Canada. We go to the next several days. This is on Saturday. We're looking at the 500 millibar height anomalies from the 0Z run of the GFS. That trough just kind of hangs around the eastern U.S. right through the Labor Day weekend and into the early part of next week. Again, this will maintain that comfortable air, cooler than normal air for, in this case, the beginning part of September. Just a deep upper level trough over the eastern half of the nation. Now, notice here this flow from way up here gets intertwined in this kind of a pattern here where we have really kind of a cross-polar flow, and that's why I indicate that this kind of a pattern in January would bring some brutal cold Arctic blasts into the eastern half of the nation. In fact, these have been Arctic blasts of air. It's just that in late August, early September, it's kind of bearable chill here, but this cross-polar flow, all the way into the middle part of next week, where the air is originating way up there in northern Canada, that drops into the central and eastern U.S. Now, let's keep moving forward here. Again, another deep upper level trough this time a week from now. Next Thursday, we're looking at a reinforcing upper level trough over the eastern half of the nation. Then we go beyond that time period. Here we are now out to September 7th, September 8th. This is more than 10 days out, maybe 11, 12 days out. This is the time period where I do see some strong ridging developing across southeastern Canada. It's one of the factors I like to look for with respect to tropical activity or potential tropical activity down across places like the southwestern Atlantic or the Gulf or the Caribbean. And it does intensify here into a relatively strong look to it here across southeastern Canada here, that ridge I'm talking about here. So we'll focus in on that probably next week to see if the tropics can become a player again here, as they are likely to do. We've still got plenty of time left here, but not for the next 5 or 10 days or so as far as the U.S. is concerned. Beyond that, again, probably more favorable conditions will develop, and one of those favorable factors will be this kind of a ridge popping back up again in the southeastern part of Canada. Well, let's wrap up with the surface forecast maps. Again, it's been a very dry pattern for much of the northeastern part of the nation. What is happening is a lot of rainfall tends to die out as it moves into this drier area. I'm talking about soil moisture-wise, drier area of the Mid-Atlantic region, the northeast U.S. Here is this next cold frontal system right here as we begin the day here on Thursday morning, all backed up by another strong Canadian high-pressure system. This is that reinforcing shot of colder than normal air driving to the south and east. Now, let's move forward in time. And this frontal system maintains some of its rainfall across the western sections of the Mid-Atlantic, northeast U.S. by the time we get to later on tonight, but it basically does not produce much rain at all across the I-95 corridor region of the Mid-Atlantic, D.C., Philadelphia, New York City. Up across the northeast, yes, there will be certainly some shower activity associated with this next frontal system, not by any means a heavy rain event. Then strong high pressure takes over for the Labor Day weekend across the northeastern quadrant of the nation. It looks like the Great Lakes to Midwest, to Mid-Atlantic, to Northeast U.S. Fine weather for Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Labor Day weekend. There will be a lot of rainfall across the deep south, extending from Florida to Texas. A lot of moisture there as the flow of air around this high pressure brings in some moisture here. The winds blow clockwise around high pressure systems, and this kind of a position of that high over the upper Midwest this weekend will pump in some moist air all the way from the southwestern Atlantic across Florida into the northern Gulf, helping to produce some decent rainfall in that part of the nation. Now, let's keep moving forward here. High pressure really just stays in control for several days across the northeast, and that will also continue this kind of a wet pattern here across the deep south. With that high up there, we still have this kind of a push of air from the southwestern Atlantic all the way across the Gulf region here, producing some decent rainfall. We saw up front on that 10-day forecast map of rainfall amounts, a lot showing up here in the deep south. Then we move forward here into the latter part of next week. This is Tuesday, and then Wednesday, midday Wednesday, we talked about another shot of colder than normal air, another widespread shot of colder than normal air. And here are some of the players on the field a week from right now. A strong cold front right here, again backed up by strong Canadian high pressure, all driving to the south and east. Now, this particular frontal system has a chance to produce some decent rainfall in the Mid-Atlantic region here a week from right now, let's say next Thursday time frame. And we'll just have to monitor this when you're in a dry pattern, as we are in the Mid-Atlantic. Sometimes these tend to wash out as you get closer and closer to the event. The rain becomes less and less impressive. But for right now, there's a chance for some decent rain about a week from right now, let's say next Thursday night time frame, associated with another strong cold frontal system. That then slides off the eastern seaboard, and we have another decently cool air mass for this time of year moving into the eastern states for next weekend. We're all the way out now to September 6th, September 7th time frame. By the way, starting to see some more activity across the eastern Pacific Ocean. That tends to tell me that there's upward motion over the eastern Pacific, and that same upward motion, what we track with that Madden-Julian oscillation, may eventually translate from the eastern Pacific back to the Atlantic basin by the time we get to, let's say, September 10th and beyond. So we'll monitor that possibility over the next several days. But for right now, the main weather story across much of the nation, cooler than normal conditions, and this is not the end of it. We have a reinforcing shot of cool air for the Labor Day weekend across much of the eastern U.S., and then another widespread cooler than normal air mass moves from Canada into the central U.S. and then eastern U.S. later next weekend. That too is likely to come with numerous record or near record low temperatures. That's it for now. For ArcfieldWeather.com, this has been meteorologist Paul Dorian.